Hello, Art 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here is our final part and part 5 of our watercolor layer. All right, so you're going to need your tiny brush, the smallest brush you have, and probably the small brush as well. We're going to start with the iris, or the color part of the eye, and you can do like a medium dark valued color. I'm still going to stick with my same variety. So I am at home. I'm just using my tray. I mixed up my colors in the tray. So we're going to go around all the little reflections in the eye. We'll paint over the pupil, and then we'll go back and add a layer in the pupil after we kind of touch other areas, and then it should be almost dry by the time we get there. All right, so like a medium value color. Notice that she has a slightly darker ring on the outside. All right, and then with my tiny brush, and I kind of wipe it off on the tray a little bit, or the edge of your palette. You don't want a lot on your brush. You're gonna go around, sorry, that's a piece of my paintbrush. The wood is falling off, okay. I'm going around the reflection. So I can paint right over the pupil, but those tiny little dots is what I'm going around. And just so you know, when we get to final draft and you have shiny reflections in your eye, we are going to paint some with some masking fluid or Frisket. Okay, so paint over the pupil. And then we can always go back and add a darker ring when we do the pupil. All right, we're going to do the other side. So darker ring on the outside of the iris. We're going to paint around the reflections or shiny part in the eye. I feel like I might have missed one in this eye, but that's okay. When I was tracing. Okay, now she's looking more human. With this same kind of color, I am going to do another layer into the eyebrow part. And it can be kind of liney. That's okay. It's definitely puddled weird on this side, which we're just going to let it be. Let the nature of watercolor be what it is. Okay. So you can definitely leave some spaces for hairs if you want. Okay. Then, and feel free to pause as we go through this to like do that step, because I'm going to move a little bit quickly so that this video isn't super long. All right, then with a darker value color, I'm going to go ahead and add a layer to the left. Actually, let me go a little bit darker than that. I'm going to add a layer to the lash line, and I'm going to go over the upper lid line. And then I'm looking on the right hand side where the shadow kind of fades into her eyelid, and then I'm gonna just tap, and their shadow kind of fading into her eye over here. I'm gonna tap in some of that dark color, and then I'm gonna tap it down into the darkest part of that value map. And then I'm going to take just water on my brush. So I'm kind of getting water on my tiny brush, wiping it off on the newspaper, and tapping the edges. So it just kind of fades in. I can do the same thing up here. We don't want it to be like as dark, dark, dark as what the picture is, because we also want room for the Sharpie, and you're going to add some mark making, and you can use like, you know, some thicker lines around her eyes. Okay, so we're going to go where the lash line is. I'm going to add my upper lid line. And then she has shadow over here on this side too. I have my value map there that I'm going to kind of tap in a little bit. Kind of darkening that color. And so if it's not as dark as you want, and you're like, well, I definitely want it to be darker with the watercolor, you can always go back and add another layer. All right, so then I'm gonna dunk my brush in the water, and then I have watercolor on it and wipe it off on the newspaper. And her waterline isn't 100% white, so I'm gonna go back over it with the tiny brush on both sides. I'm still trying to avoid the highlights over in the corners of the eyes. And then I'm going to go on the under eye area, her lower bags, as some of you call them, her lower lids. She's too young to have bags. And then I'm going to tap into the shadow part on the right hand side, and then get water on my brush, wipe it off, and kind of blend in a little bit. I'm going to do the same on the left hand side. So we're just kind of giving that darker value underneath her eyes a little extra. So kind of go underneath the waterline, and then tap your brush in the water, wipe it off, and then you can just kind of blend in. And then tap that out. So she has a little bit of shadow in the corners of her eyes. And so I'm just going to add a little bit. I don't want to get too dark, because we can always go back and add, and it's like pretty dark shadow, but we can always go back and add more. We just can't really, oh, there's a bright spot there. Can't really take away. So add a little shadow in the corner of her eyes. That's pretty much all I'm going to do for the eyes, because I want to make sure I want to make sure the Sharpie and mark making will show, although this eye on the left is looking darker, so I am going to go back and tap a little bit more into that right one. And I'll probably tap a little bit more up top. All right, then I'm gonna mix up, like, I'm gonna use a dark violet blue, or dark blue violet, and we're gonna go under the nose, or refine the nose a little bit. So essentially what we're doing is refining. So I'm gonna add a shadow underneath. That shadow kind of fades along the side of the nose, and I can see my value map. So for this one, I probably stay a little bit in the value map. And then if you want this side to fade out, I'm going to dunk my brush in water, wipe it off where it still has some watercolor on it. I'm just going to kind of tap along the outside. Just a little bit of water to fade in to what I already have. So you're kind of blending it. And then with like a medium value, I'm going to go back and add just a little bit underneath the nose, especially on the left-hand side, so it's darker under the nose. So with whatever color, and then I just kind of tap and blend it, fade it out. And sometimes I'll just use my finger, or you can use paper towel to get it to fade out. That's the nice thing about this paper. And that's pretty much all I'm going to do, because I still want, well, actually I might go, sorry. I might add a little extra use some of my medium value. I'm gonna add a little bit along that side, just a tiny bit, add some water. Fade it out, and a little bit of water. And then, small brush. Just water to kind of fade out to what we already have. Okay. Then lips. So I'm going to go back with my darkest valued color. I'm going to redo that line between. I'm looking for that little scoop on the edges. I'm going to grab a little bit of a medium value and pull up a little bit. And then you're looking for any kind of wrinkles that you kind of see on the top lip. All right, then her bottom lip is obviously lighter than the top, but it's not, you know, as light as we have it now. But I'm trying to avoid this highlight area, like where it's super bright. And I'm just gonna add like a subtle layer on top of what I have, avoiding that little highlight. So I'm gonna dip my brush in the water. I have watercolor on it, and I'm gonna wipe it off a little bit. And then I'm gonna go back and add, and it will probably pick up some of what you have there. Okay, I'm gonna touch a little bit. So I'm adding just a little bit of value. Okay, she's coming to life. It's happening. While we're waiting for our eyes to dry, I would take a look. Like, is the bottom, hold on, let me move the camera a little bit. Is the bottom of your chin a little bit dark? If it's not, maybe add a little layer and just kind of tap and fade out. Another part I would look at is this side of the face in general on the right hand side darker than the left? Like in general, it's a little bit darker. I would take a look at hair. So whenever I had like extra on my brush, I kind of went over some of the lines in the hair. And so I'm going to do that anywhere where you see just pencil lines. And you can also go back and add a little bit, sorry, move this a little, while we're waiting for eyes. So it'll take like a minute or two, a couple minutes. And I would refine a little bit. So I'm going to use some of my darker valued colors. And I'm going to go back in and I'm going to pull from border in the darkest parts. Not a ton, because obviously you're going to decide what kind of mark making you want to do there. But I'm also trying to balance out colors that I used in the face and the darkest shadowy parts to also happen in the hair. So definitely pull from border into the hair so it doesn't just like start and stop where the hair is. And I'm going to leave a decent amount of white just because we want our mark making to show. So take a couple minutes, add a little extra layer. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit more on this right side. And then over on this left side, even the hair is coming down, I'd add a few marks. Even though it's highlighted, it's weird if we just totally leave it white. Okay, so for the eyes, we're gonna go back and pick a dark color that you're working with. I'm gonna go back and outline my iris again. And then I'm gonna make a really dark blue violet or a really dark version of your color. So remember, you can add the color's complement to darken. So I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow to darken mine. And if you're working with blue or violet, you can add a tiny touch of black, tiny, to deepen your color. And we're gonna go back in where the pupil is and add. And I'm gonna do another layer on her lash line over here. And that's pretty much all we're gonna do. You might double check, I mean, like if you didn't get under the nose really dark, I could add a little extra, you know, under the nose. So it's mostly facial features that we're refining, a little bit in hair. Although if her neck is really light, you could add a little bit in this part. For me, this part of like the value map on her neck is the darkest part, but the way it puddled kind of funky. It's not as dark anymore. So you could add another layer to any of the darkest parts of the value map that like really aren't that dark anymore. And then I always just like add it in there, and then you can kind of just tap water to fade it out, to kind of blend in with what you have. But again, like I feel like that neck got too dark, but you want to leave enough, you know, light values that we'll be able to see all of your mark making. And that's pretty much it. So yes, it looks sloppy, but this is called a loose underlayer. And then you'll decide how much of an underlayer you want for your next practice and how much of an underlayer you want for your actual final draft. All right, good luck.